Stop what you're doing and listen, because what just unfolded in the last 48 hours, this is the kind of political earthquake that sends shockwaves through every courthouse, every media room, every back channel office in Washington, D.C. On the same night that the entire Georgia prosecution against President Trump collapsed like a wet cardboard box, a federal judge hundreds of miles away just unloaded one of the most hostile rulings that we've ever seen. This is a ruling dripping with venom, calling Trump a mastermind of strategic abuse and slapping him with $1 million penalty like it was some kind of a personal vendetta. And here's where it gets wild, guys. Adam Schiff, yes, that same Adam Schiff is once again right in the middle of it. Once again, shielding the same liar, the same ecosystem of deception that he's been protecting since the Russiagate hoax. Once again, trying to rescue the collapsing narratives that he built his entire political career on. But this time the system didn't bend. It cracked. Federal judges are revolting. Prosecutors are backing out. Georgia just admitted openly that their case, it was never going to survive now that Trump is the sitting president. And Schiff, let's just say Adam Schiff is scrambling. He's panicking. He's exposed. But tonight we're breaking down every piece of that implosion and what it means for the country. Buckle up, folks. This is the moment that everything snapped. Hit the like button and subscribe. I want to start with the part that nobody in the media wants to touch, because this exposes their entire ecosystem. Adam Schiff's pattern of protecting liars. It didn't start yesterday. It didn't start with this week's meltdown. It goes all the way back to the moment that he realized that his political career depended on covering up for the same intelligence insiders who targeted Donald Trump in 2016. You see, Schiff didn't just get things wrong. He knowingly amplified falsehoods. He sat in classified briefings where he was told directly that there was no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And then he walked onto live television the same day and claimed that he had more than circumstantial evidence that Trump was compromised. So he did this repeatedly. So when the FISA abuses surfaced, he defended them. When the falsified emails were exposed, he excused them. When the IG reports contradicted his claims, he pretended that they never existed. And so now, years later, here he is again in 2025, running cover for yet another figure that's tied to the same collapse narrative. He's not just protecting a liar, he's protecting the machinery that depended on that lie. And so now, here's where the twist comes in, because despite years of being exposed, Schiff is still doing it. He's still shielding, still obstructing, still rushing to defend anyone tied to the original Russiagate architecture, the same people whose careers imploded once Trump returned to power in January. Now, one of the central characters in this whole Russiagate world, it's the same ecosystem of analysts and intelligence leakers and legal strategists who've fed the media their fiction. All of them just came under reviewed scrutiny this month. Federal judges and new investigators have begun unraveling their conduct, exposing inconsistencies, and Schiff knew about all of this years ago. So, what did Schiff do? Exactly what he always does. He positions himself as the protector. He declares any investigation into them as being politically motivated. He warns the media that Trump is out for revenge, hoping the press will essentially parrot it the same way that he did during the old collusion days. But here's the problem for Schiff. The judiciary isn't playing along anymore. These judges aren't buying the narratives, they're questioning them. And the people Schiff is trying to shelter, they're now liabilities. And so this is why Schiff is panicking, because the old shield that he used to hide behind, it's gone. And so while Schiff is scrambling to hold his collapsing universe together, a federal judge just poured gasoline on the fire with one of the most aggressive rulings that we've ever seen against the sitting president. So the 11th Circuit didn't just affirm the nearly $1 million sanction against President Trump and Alina Habba. They did it with language that was so partisan, so emotionally charged, it reads less like a judicial opinion and more like a CNN monologue stapled to a federal court filing. They call Trump a mastermind of strategic abuse, a prolific and sophisticated litigant. They essentially declared that Trump's very attempt to challenge the Clinton, Comey, Schiff ecosystem in court was itself an act of misconduct. Now, think about that for a second, okay? The same courts that once allowed federal agencies to push this Russia collusion hoax from one courtroom to another is now claiming Trump committed abuse for trying to expose the architects of that hoax through legal discovery. This wasn't just a ruling. This was a message. This was a warning shot. Don't ever go after the old order again. But the timing, guys, that's the real tell, because while this judge was torching Trump, something else was happening miles away. Georgia was falling apart. Now, nothing hits harder than finding out your ER doctor that you needed wasn't covered. One moment of crisis becomes months of bills. Chapter makes sure that your Medicare plan protects you in emergencies, not abandons you. They check your Medicare coverage in ways that most people never even know how to. Most people are preventing the ER shock before it happens. Most people are already dialing the phone number down below at 909-563-8279, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. There's a link down below. And real quick, I want to highlight this email that I received from Gene Jansen because it really shows exactly why I talk about Chapter as often as I do. So Gene wrote, "Thank you so much for telling us about Chapter and the wonderful work that they do. They actually built a program around my specific health needs. And so with my new health plan, I have features I didn't have before. Also, I'm saving money with zero copay for primary care and saving mileage too. My new primary care is now 10 miles away, whereas my former primary care was 40 miles. Gene, seriously, I just want to thank you so much for sending that because stories like yours really remind people that Medicare doesn't have to be so confusing or expensive. You can get the right coverage when someone actually sits down and puts your needs first. And so this is where the hypocrisy becomes unavoidable because as Trump gets hit with one of the largest civil sanctions in modern political history, the criminal cases against the very people who targeted him, Comey, Clinton-era operatives, intelligence officials, they're collapsing like dominoes. James Comey, his case didn't fall apart because he was innocent. It fell apart because the prosecutor appointed to handle it, Lindsay Halligan, she was ruled unlawfully installed. It was a technicality. It was a bureaucratic misfire. This is one that the media immediately spun as procedural integrity, even though the judge openly stated the indictments could be refiled. But did you hear that on CNN? Did you hear that on MSNBC? Of course not. Did you hear one anchor ask why power players keep getting recused by technicalities while Trump keeps getting hammered over these frivolous filings? Of course not, because the pattern is too obvious. When the establishment is the target, the system finds the exit ramp. When Trump is the target, the system builds a runway. And now, after years of lawfare, those two paths are crossing at the worst possible moment for Democrats because the Georgia case didn't just wobble, it imploded. Now let's talk about this meltdown that shook the entire country, Georgia, because while Schiff was protecting liars in Washington, and while a federal judge was unloading on President Trump in Florida, the last remaining 2020 election case, the big one, the one that Democrats swore would finally take Trump down, collapsed in a single blow. Judge Scott McAfee dismissed the entire prosecution top to bottom, not because new evidence emerged, not because witnesses recanted, but because the state's own lead prosecutor admitted the truth under oath. The case was legally unworkable and would drag on for 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10 years. That is not a prosecution. That is a political weapon disguised as a courtroom strategy. And now that Trump is the sitting president again, every legal expert, even the ones who hate him, knows Georgia could never force a president into years of pretrial hearings, depositions, and procedural fights. Georgia officials finally said it out loud. There is no viable path forward. That wasn't a legal retreat. That was a political surrender, a confession that the case's existence depended entirely on Trump not being president again. And once Georgia finally admitted the case was unrealistic, everything Fani Willis built came crashing down with it. This was the case that she launched in front of cameras. This was the RICO circus that she constructed to humiliate Trump. This was Fani Willis's golden ticket to national fame. But what happened? Fani Willis's misconduct got so bad, so blatant that she was removed from the case altogether. Conflicts of interest, political grandstanding, unethical coordination with outside actors. This was a complete meltdown of professional credibility. Her replacement, the new prosecutor, had no choice but to acknowledge the obvious. The case only worked when Trump was a private citizen with limited leverage and no presidential immunity. Once he returned to the Oval Office in January 2025, the case became a ticking time bomb for constitutional problems. They knew it, they hid it, and when they couldn't hide it anymore, they retreated. This wasn't justice. It never was. This was theater. This was a political performance engineered for headlines, fundraising, and primetime TV. And now that theater has burned down to the ground. The Georgia retreat didn't just hurt Democrats politically. It exposed exactly how fragile their entire lawfare strategy actually was. And that brings us to the moment that the entire case officially died. Peter Scanalakis, the newly appointed special prosecutor, stepping forward and saying the quiet part out loud. This case was a political fantasy from the start. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't spin it. He told Judge McAfee on record that dragging a sitting president into state courtrooms would trigger endless constitutional crises. He admitted that the case was not just weak, It was untriable. He admitted the timeline was absurd, a decade of litigation, and he also admitted something Fani Willis never would. The case wasn't designed for justice, it was designed for pressure, a political pressure point, a PR weapon, a cable news graphic. But the moment Trump won the presidency again, the pressure valve snapped. Suddenly, the case wasn't a weapon, it was a liability, a national embarrassment waiting to explode. So Skandalakis, he did something rare in American politics. He told the truth. He walked away. He dropped the case. And in doing so, he confirmed what millions of Americans already suspected. Georgia never had a case. They had a narrative. But Georgia wasn't the only institution that was backing away. Across the country, federal judges, they began doing something that the DOJ never expected. They started rejecting the shortcuts, the improvisations, the procedural gymnastics the anti-Trump legal machine had relied on for years. Take Judge Cameron Curry. He ruled that the special prosecutor in the Comey and Letitia James cases, they were unlawfully appointed, not improperly supervised, not ambiguously authorized, unlawfully installed, meaning the Biden-era DOJ had cut constitutional corners so aggressively that the court had no choice but to toss the indictments. This wasn't a victory for Comey. This was an exposure of the system. Other judges followed suit, scrutinizing rushed appointments, procedural shortcuts, and legal theories stretched far beyond their original intent. The message was unmistakable. The judiciary had reached its boiling point, its breaking point, and they're not going to carry the political burden anymore. They weren't going to be complicit in lawfare dressed up as prosecution. For the first time in years, courts were signaling that legitimacy matters, and they were no longer willing to sacrifice it to protect the old political order. So now here's the part that the media will never admit. Their entire legal machine is backing away because Donald J. Trump is president again. That's the truth. That is the reason that the gear stopped. That's why cases are collapsing instead of accelerating. Lawfare only worked when Trump was static, a private citizen, a man with no executive authority, no DOJ oversight, no constitutional shield. But once Trump walked back into the Oval Office in January 2025, everything changed. Suddenly, every prosecutor, every partisan judge, every agency lawyer realized that they could no longer operate in the shadows of the old era. Their shortcuts would be reviewed, their misconduct could be exposed, their decisions could be revisited, and they panicked. You could feel it. You could see it in the abrupt withdrawals, the procedural retreats, the sudden reevaluations of cases that were once claimed airtight. This isn't confidence. This is fear. Fear that Trump's return means that their tactics will finally face daylight. This is fear that the institutions that weaponized their power for years are now standing on unstable ground. The legal warfare didn't end because Trump lost. It ended because he won. And if you want the clearest proof that the system has been two-tiered from the very beginning, here it is. Trump gets slapped with nearly $1 million for filing a lawsuit, while people who misled judges, doctored FISA warrants, and fed false intelligence to the FBI, they walk away untouched. Let's break this down. Trump is punished not for lying, not for hiding evidence, not for defying court orders, but for using the courts in a way Democrats find inconvenient. Meanwhile, the insiders who orchestrated the Russia collusion hoax, they escape through loopholes. They slide out through technicalities. They're rescued by procedural quirks that the media magically calls integrity instead of privilege. Comey avoids trial because the prosecutor was improperly appointed. Clinton avoids charges because investigators couldn't prove intent. FISA abusers avoid consequences because the process has already been reviewed. But Trump, he files a civil suit and gets hit with $1 million penalty for doing so. That's not justice. That's control. That's a system screaming, you are allowed to sue us until your lawsuit gets a little bit too close to the truth. And that's why this moment is different, because the double standard is now undeniable. And now as we reach the part that Adam Schiff absolutely did not see coming, because while he's been scrambling to protect yet another liar from the old Russiagate ecosystem, the judiciary is shredding the very institutions that he spent years weaponizing. For almost a decade, Schiff operated under one assumption, that the courts, the media, and the intelligence bureaucracy, they would always protect him. That no matter how many times he misled the public, exaggerated evidence, or concealed exculpatory facts, the system would just close ranks around him. But in 2021, it's a different world. Not the show, but a different world. Judges aren't shielding misconduct anymore, they're exposing it. They're writing rulings that directly contradict Schiff's narratives. They're revisiting old assumptions. They're questioning the legal foundations of the entire Russiagate operations. That is why Schiff is panicking, because he already knows what's happening if this continues. If prosecutors keep admitting misconduct, if judges just keep overturning cases built on political motive, if investigators finally get full visibility into how the intelligence community operated in 2016, then the truth that Schiff spent years burying, the truth that he protected liars to conceal, this will all come straight to the surface. And he won't be the shield anymore. He'll be the headline. So I want to bring it all home because this moment here, this week, this isn't just about Georgia collapsing or a judge torching Trump or Schiff scrambling to save another compromised insider. This is about something much, much bigger. America is watching a legal system that was stretched to its breaking point finally buckle under the weight of its own contradictions. The same courts that once indulged partisan prosecutions, they're now retreating. The same prosecutors who once chased political trophies, they're now admitting defeat. The same institutions that promised to protect democracy, they're now revealing just how politically contaminated they really were. And so this isn't the end of lawfare. No. This is the exposure of it. This is a system that prided itself on neutrality now standing revealed. Two sets of rules, two sets of standards, two sets of outcomes. And as it collapses in full public view, millions of Americans are waking up to a truth that they weren't supposed to see. Justice was never blind. It was curated. It was managed. It was redirected. But now, under the pressure of Trump's return to power, the cracks can't be hidden anymore. The old order is breaking. The truth is surfacing, and the country's watching. One ruling at a time. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're one of the real ones who really enjoy what we do here on the channel, you've got to check out the Inner Circle. This is where our true supporters get exclusive access to content that I just can't share here, completely commercial free. It's also the best way to keep this channel going strong. So if you want to be a part of something special, join us over there. Links in the description or in the pinned comment down below.